doing these, you all are working on this, identifying great organizations with whom to partner, quote unquote. But the question is, what does partnership really mean? At the same time, we've also been kind of talking about what is our role as a club. And I know one of the challenges that I have certainly struggled with, Michelle and I have struggled with it, our board has struggled with it, is to try to balance that, so the Rotary model of one of the mottos is we think globally but act locally. Then the challenge with being a global club is we don't have that local connection. So really trying to identify what is our value proposition, what is our identity, as relates to trying to solve a global issue, but working on it as one community at a time. So I want to give you a little insight into kind of some of our thinking, but I'm also, part of that is we have something in place already happening as sort of that template here in Minnesota. And so I wanted to, with an organization called Love 146. So my second agenda item is that I know that as the Programs and Projects Committee has been looking at organizations, we had suggested that Michelle and I would bring the recommendation for Love 146 to the board rather than having the Programs and Projects Committee work on that, because we have already established some communication and coordination with folks from that organization. So wanted to give you the rest of the club a little bit of insight as to who this organization that you might keep hearing about. We've been working with it. We've been working with it very pretty detailed here in Minnesota. And so wanted to give you a little insight into that organization. So dual purpose this morning. So we will go, let's see. So I'm going to start with kind of who is Love 146. So I'm going to do my second assignment first and give you a sense of what Love 146 is as an organization, because that will help you with the kind of the context of where our role is. Let's see if I can move those. All right. So Love 146 is a not-for-profit organization. Their corporate headquarters are in Connecticut, but they have a large office in Houston, Texas. And Michelle and I had the honor of meeting with them, some of their staff people, when we were at the Zone Institute in Houston last fall, and had a fairly extensive conversation with them. But currently they have services in 22 states. They have a big program in the UK and one in the Philippines. They have two types of services. They have survivor care and they have prevention or education. And they have we'll get into the education thing in a minute. Their survivor care program, that is basically based in Connecticut, but they serve, as you can see, limited number of youth, but they have the youth that they work with. Young people are really intense programs. So they have rapid responses program. They have long-term care services, which include counseling, your basic survivor care and all the elements of that. But they also then have employment and education services that they work with those youth to find alternative income and finish their education and training to be able to be self-sufficient. Their prevention program, which is really their hallmark program that we would get involved with, is called Not a Number. Not a Number is a very intense 5-module prevention curriculum that works with youth and really helps them to identify how to protect themselves from human trafficking, and giving them through information, skill development, and critical thinking. So the Not a Number curriculum, which it consists of 5 modules. And I'm not going to read through them, but that's kind of their modules. They're fairly intense curriculum within each module. It is conducted live. We have, it was interesting. I've had a couple of conversations with them. Especially with COVID, they've been challenged to put their curriculum and training online as a Zoom option. And they're pretty committed to saying, because of part of the value of, or much of the value of their interaction with the kids is to kind of read the room, see what's, have that opportunity for vulnerable conversations and creating a safe space for those conversations, that they really have kind of held the line and said, what we see as a value of our training cannot happen online. So they've had to adjust with that. They work in schools, but they also work in other areas or venues that would be focusing on at-risk youth. For instance, in Minnesota, they have one of the trainers is in a juvenile detention center. They have another trainer that works within the foster care system. So they also go out and identify, not just in the general population of youth, but also work with truly those youth that have been identified as vulnerable or at risk. And as you can see, they really have, their curriculum is a combination of media, didactic conversation, self-disclosure, and sharing amongst the participants. I'm going to play, let's see if this is going to work. I'm going to give you, this is a great video, I think, that Love 146 has produced that I'm going to share with you. It is about 4 minutes, but I wanted to give you, this will give you a sense of their program and the folks that work it.
Can anyone hear this?
No.
Okay.
Can you not hear it?
Yeah, we can't
No.
hear it.
No
No.
volume.
You have to do share. There's this sound. There's this thing in an option
Yeah, within share.
within share. That's right.
So you might need to unshare your screen and then click share again, and then it'll do, if you click share, then it'll have an option for optimize video.
Got it.
Sometimes you have to turn up the volume of your own computer.
Well, I found the optimize and the share the sound, so we'll try this again. Okay, get rid of this. All right, can you see that now?
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll try this one more time from current slide. Tell me if you can hear it.
Not yet, but it looked like you were
years.
muted.
And through our
There
work,
you go.
we've learned
Yes.
how children end up being trafficked. They tell us what happened and how it happened. They tell us how they were deceived. They tell us how hurt they are. They'll say, if only I'd known. Survivors of child trafficking all have their own unique stories, but the stories share a common thread. These children are vulnerable. They're vulnerable from living in poverty. They're vulnerable because they feel rejected. They're vulnerable because they feel unloved, because of stereotypes they feel pressured from, because of how technology can be used to target them. They're vulnerable simply because they're children. Traffickers know these vulnerabilities better than the children themselves. In fact, they count on that. And children, their lives can change in a moment.
Love 146 exists because there are children who are used and sold like commodities.
For years, we've journeyed together with survivors down the long road of recovering their childhoods, their hope, healing, and their future.
But the reality is, we do survivor care because a horrendous crime has already been committed against a child.
But you can't continue doing survivor care without asking, how do we stop this? What is the best way to prevent this from happening in the first place?
We asked, what if the children had just known about trafficking? But the answers have come up short. A lot of research shows us that knowledge alone does not change the outcome.
And these moments are complex. It's not as simple as just say no to traffickers.
To stop children from being trafficked, we need to do something more.
When a child encounters a trafficker, they are often at a disadvantage.
They might see a friend, an ally. They see someone who they believe understands them.
The thing is, traffickers don't look like what we see in the movies. Sometimes they look like you and me.
If you don't know you're being manipulated and how to get away, you're trapped before you even know what's happening.
So we have a strategy to equip and empower youth to protect themselves and their friends.
Through prevention education, we give children the advantage. We teach them how to spot traffickers even when they don't look like you'd expect.
We go beyond awareness. We give them the skills to stay safe. You've got to know your own vulnerabilities and what makes you a target.
You have to know who's actually on your side and who really isn't.
You have to know how a predator might approach you.
And you've got to know what you'll do next. You need muscle memory in that moment.
More importantly, you've got to know who you are. That's what makes you strong.
When you love yourself, when you know your own value.
When you draw upon your innate resilience and creativity.
That's why we created Not a Number.
It's an in-depth prevention program informed by the experiences of survivors and written with the help of some of the leading anti-trafficking and child protection experts.
We're training teachers, social workers, and professionals to help children develop the skills and agility they need to respond in unsafe situations.
We're going through these situations with the kids, thinking through the scenarios, planning their responses, and they actually get to act it out together.
So they'll know what to do in those critical moments.
So far, we've seen some amazing results.
Children have come back to the group and shared how they've been able to avoid potentially dangerous situations.
How they're now able to see and empathize with friends who need support. We know that reaching children with this program is a powerful way to keep our children safe.
For too long, many of us in the anti-trafficking movement were responding to what traffickers were doing.
We want to turn the tables. We want to make traffickers scramble to respond to what we're doing.
We need to make it more difficult for them. Actually, we need to make it impossible.
To traffickers, this is about making money, which involves the economics of supply and demand. Many organizations are working to disrupt the demand. We're working to disrupt the supply.
And our stomachs turn at the word supply to describe children.
Supply is a term for things like oil, or wheat, or steel, not people. But the traffickers see supply. We see children.
They're not commodities.
Not a price.
Not a statistic.
Not a label.
Not a number.
Okay, now I gotta get back to there we go. All right. All right, so with that kind of context in mind, how I originally got involved with Love 146 was through the Rotary Initiative here in Minnesota, and have kind of created, so for those of you who are not familiar with the initiative here in Minnesota, that we had an initiative that started in 2017 for that was identified as the Rotary Initiative to End Human Trafficking initially in Minnesota. And then as we brought in our third Rotary district, we expanded our reach to North Dakota, Wisconsin, and Ontario. So we have been working since 2017 to end human trafficking in our, what we're now calling the tri-district area of up here in the upper Midwest. Many of the things that we worked on through our Minnesota, our tri-district initiative have served as the template and the foundation for this club. And so it's sort of our incubator, if you will, or our beta test as we look at what do we do as we build things in Minnesota, how can we expand that to be replicable or scalable? And now we're kind of working as our club is growing as well, working in tandem with the work that's happening in Minnesota. So got involved with Love 146 through a connection with our Minnesota program, with our Minnesota Department of Health and Human Services, their Safe Harbor program. Got connected, started to quote partner with them in 2017. And I will tell you that we struggled with the same kind of conversations that we're having as a club about what is defining a partnership. And I will tell you that when you at the working with a government entity, the Minnesota Department of Health, and working with several lawyers who were my connectors or connections there. You start using the word partnership, and those folks get twitchy. So we have worked over the last 5 years to really define what that relationship is, and really expanded on that, and have a great relationship with them now. But they brought Love 146 to us as Rotary because they had been working with Love 146 in creating and developing this training and embedding this training in several schools and organizations. They had received a fairly significant grant, I think 2 or 3 years ago, and had pushed out the Love 146 training across all of Minnesota. They're now looking at expanding that training and doing kind of second and third opportunities. So what we've done as sort of part of the involvement that I've had personally, as well as representing both the Minnesota initiative and now our club, is that we were able to host a train the trainer workshop last July, I believe. And they were looking for a place, conference center or conference rooms that they could take over for 4 days for this training. And I was able to work with my company to be able to offer space in our corporate headquarters. They are now looking for, as we move forward into September, they're going to be doing this training again, and we'll go into they have both facilitator training and then train the trainer training. And they're looking for Rotary to help underwrite the additional trainings that are going to be facilitated by Love 146. We've been able to secure our Optum headquarters rooms there again for a second training in September. And then they're also looking for Rotary to help them with making connections in local communities, knowing that the power of Rotary and what we have to offer is really that networking opportunity. So that's kind of where we're at. What does partnership really mean? And I'm using this, keep this, as we look at this conceptual framework, this is specific to the partnership with Love 146 and the Minnesota districts, but I have a similar graphic that is more generic, that really looks at this is what our role would be for any kind of initiative. So in this instance, we have the Rotary Club to End Human Trafficking, that's us, working with the Safe Harbor program, or the Minnesota Department of Health and Love 146, and we work together as sort of a triune partnership. We push that partnership out to local districts. In this case, there's 3 different districts that we're working with. And then we work with these, each of these districts have a district lead. We work with those leads to push out the initiative and help spread the word, get the influence out to local Rotary clubs, as well as, and in this case, looking at trying to identify school districts that would be willing to identify both potential facilitators, whether they're teachers, social workers in the high school, health specialists, other groups there. So this is kind of the model that this is specific to this initiative, but this is also kind of our conceptual framework as we define what partnership is that we would see ourselves as being that connector to, substitute Love 146 for any other of the other organizations that the Programs and Projects Committee recommends approval for to the board, and the board approves. Think about if there's a third organization, we would work with them too, to kind of pull together the program, identify where, really clearly articulate what the role of our Rotary Club would be to be able to support either those organizations or the specific programs. And then we would push these out to local districts. And then have the district leads push out and work directly with the local Rotary clubs in their areas, depending on the initiative. All right. So just to give you a sense of the specific back to Minnesota, the Love 146 partnership, here's kind of the sense. So the way that the organization works, Love 146 trains facilitators. Those facilitators then, once they're trained, have a requirement to actually facilitate so many trainings with so many youth. So once you're trained as a facilitator, you then have to go work with, identify the youth, work with the school district to embed that 5-module program, work with those youth. And then, excuse me. So they've trained about 200 facilitators. They had their first train the training in Minnesota, train the trainers. So in order to be a trainer, you have to have been a facilitator. So, and done so many trainings yourselves. They had the first training last July. They trained 6 facilitators to become trainers. That was officially hosted by our club. I took the executive, well, with board approval, was able to represent the club as saying this was our role in hosting this this training. And then you can see that they've had a number of other accomplishments. So what we're looking for, what they're going to be eventually looking for, so we have what's happening in Minnesota. They're doing another training, train the trainer here in Minnesota in September of this next year. They are now coming to us as a club. I just met with Aria, one of the people on that video. I just met with her last week and said, okay, now that we're looking at this from a Rotary Club perspective as a global club, what can we do to support you? So they're looking at, they would love to be expand their education programs to other states or regional areas in other countries. They're very deliberate, so they'd want to be very measured about it and planful, that if we identify a region or a state, that we would work with them and they would work with the state level. They're looking at trying to do not just a city area, but more regional or state level. Because of their offices, where their offices are located, they're already very embedded in Texas, in Southern California, and there were some other states, Minnesota, obviously. They would love to expand to some other areas on the East Coast. They had specifically identified South Carolina and Tennessee. So they kind of threw that out to us to say, do you have a network in a Rotary network in either of those places or along the east, kind of eastern seaboard? They would also like to work with us as Rotary clubs, knowing the power of our networks, to identify those community leaders that work with youth, whether they're the school superintendents, organizations that work with at-risk youth. And then obviously they would want us to help either directly through our club or working with through the Rotary districts to help fund the training programs, either help underwrite the train the trainer programs, or provide scholarships or for the facilitator programs. They do have a philosophy that they want to charge at least partial charge for the facilitator programs, because they want those facilitators to have a little bit of skin in the game. All right, let's see. Here's kind of the train the trainer to give you an insight for the train the trainer program. It costs about $29,000 for the 4-day training. That includes the training, the travel expenses, the training fee, the training materials, and probably most importantly, once they do the training of these trainers, they commit to identifying a coach or a mentor for each of the trainers that they work for a year afterwards. And it's pretty intense, and they are there for those trainers to be able to continue kind of that continuing ed, reinforcement of their training, being a support as they identify issues that they may not have come up with in the training program. It is interesting, I was able to sit in on the training program last year. Between meetings, I would run down and sit for a little while to listen to what was going on. And it was interesting listening to these folks who had been facilitators, who had been working with youth, and having to now be trained to be working with and train other adults. And it was interesting listening to some of them saying, you know, this is going to be hard for me. I'm used to dealing with high school kids, and now I'm going to have to teach other professionals, whether they're other teachers or other professionals. So, you know, it is an intense training. So when we think about $29,000 from a Rotary Club, and this is more for Rotary Clubs, but for us too, is $29,000 may sound like a lot of money, but when we look at their commitment to, once they're trained, when they train facilitators, and then that impact of based on the program parameters, it comes to really about $6 per youth that is impacted by these education programs. And when we think of the cost, just the economic cost of you know, prevention versus rescue and survivor, it would be, you know, that's the return on our investment is immense. And I'm just going to leave you with a couple of quotes. I'm not going to read these, but here are some quotes from both youth and the facilitators that after going through the program.